Grand Prix as well in the Legacy format with Teamer Delver, but he's taking this punishing teamer approach, playing against Mark Sipics, who is playing Death in Taxes. So right away, we're going to see a matchup where you've got a Treasure Cruise deck on your left, you've got a Fair deck without Treasure Cruise on the right. And we'll see if the Fair deck without Treasure Cruise can get the job done. We have seen Death in Taxes win tournaments before.
Though I believe this matchup will be challenging for Mark because it's not just about Treasure Cruise here. He's got to be able to be punishing fire as well, and that's complicated for Death in Taxes. Sometimes they have some threats hanging out, like Bramaz, and if he gets Mother of Runes online, it can get problematic, but a lot of his threats just get devoured by punishing fire.
It's a plans to start here from Mark Wilson with a copy of Volcanic Island before passing the turn. As round number 1 is underway here from Philadelphia. Feel free to join in on the conversation on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag SCGPHILLY all weekend long. Sipics does have a second land to play. It does look like a Plains, but he'll go with a copy of Karakas. 2 mana will be tapped, and it is time for a Stoneforge Mystic. We'll see if Wilson has a response to this. Card that Jacob has played against quite a bit, I imagine. He will cast a Mental Note in response. Mental Note will turn over a copy of Thought Scour and Snapcaster Mage. Of course, the cantrip will allow Jacob to draw a card, which is a copy of Thought Scour. Mark's Stoneforge Mystic will resolve. It's time to go equipment hunting.
And looking at Jacob's list for the removal here, of course, there are the 3 copies of Punishing Fire that we've mentioned a few times here. Also 4 copies of Lightning Bolt. So a few answers to this.
Mark is going to dig out a copy of Batterskull. Also has a copy of Umezawa's Jite and Sword of Fire. Nice to search up with his Stoneforge Mystic, becoming basically the industry standard here in Legacy.
I do like the sword quite a bit in the deck. I am skeptical of the Batterskull, just because it's so bad to draw. It seems incongruous with the deck's plan. I think that if I was playing Death and Taxes, I would probably just have a Jite and 1 sword, probably Fire and Ice. But a lot of people still go with the Batterskull.
Volcanic Island. Now here's a copy of Punishing Fire from Wilson. That'll take care of Stoneforge Mystic, one of the engine cards of his deck. He does have 3 copies of this card in the main, and with Thought Scour and Mental Note, he will often find it pretty early in the game.
And you can see Jacob with Grove of the Burn Willows in hand, but not deploying it because he wants to protect it from a potential Wasteland, and he gets paid off here as Mark goes ahead and takes care of the Volcanic Island with Wasteland.
Wasteland will come down, but there is the Grove. Spirit of Labyrinth also joins the party as well, but Wilson has his engine up and running now, able to return Punishing Fire with that Grove of the Burn Willows that he did just play. Sipics draws a card. It looks like it's a copy of Flicker Wisp. He'll start by attacking here with Spirit of the Labyrinth. Punishing Fire will take care of that as well. And Punishing Fire isn't something that we have seen a lot of recently. This looks like he's going to go with a copy of Ramaz, King of Oresco, something we typically see in Standard, not that much in Legacy, but it is actually a 2-of here for Mark in his build of Death and Taxes.
Well, Bramaz has picked up in popularity. I think we typically see 1 copy, sometimes 2. A lot of it is the format is still defined by Lightning Bolt. That is the removal spell of choice, and Bramaz is, of course, immune to that.
But speaking of Punishing Fire, you think of Punishing Fire, you think of Punishing Jund. That's really about it. We don't see it many other places. This is a different take on that, with Wilson putting that side by side, not Dark Confidant, but with Brainstorm and Treasure Cruise. And one could argue that those blue cards are better than the black ones.
Well, there are merits to both sides. I think Treasure Cruise is just so powerful in these kind of strategies, and it represents extra stabilization. A problem that these punishing loam strategies have sometimes is that when they don't have loam and Punishing Fire, there's just not a lot going on. And so having Treasure Cruise is just another piece of big action, which the deck typically lacks.
2 cards going to go back here for Wilson after resolving a Brainstorm. But no land there for Jacob, let alone no fetch land, so he just has to pass the turn back over to Sipics. Sipics draws another copy of Ramaz. Again, 2 copies in his main deck this weekend of his build in Death and Taxes. Does have a Mirran Crusader, also 3 copies of Flicker Wisp as far as 3 mana spells are concerned. He will get into the red zone here with Bramaz, and the Cat Token will be joining the party as well. So this actually seems like a difficult card for Wilson to be able to handle. 4 toughness is pretty tough.
It is. He needs to either overpower it. He can set up things like blocking with a Snapcaster Mage and bolting. But keep in mind, Mark also has a Karakas up. So it's going to be really tough for Jacob to answer Bramaz in any sort of permanent sense.
Well, the Rune's going to come down, and of course, when you're playing a Death and Taxes, you have to get that thing off the table. So Wilson is going to give Sipics a life to pick up his copy of Punishing Fire, the old 1-2 punch there. We'll go back Jacob's way, and Jacob's going to probably cast a Mental Note or a Thought Scour and upkeep, and he will. It'll be Thought Scour to clear the top of his deck.
Exactly. He knows that he's Brainstorm locked currently, so he wants to get those 2 cards off the top, try to find a land.
Dig Through Time and Pyroblast are turned over from Thought Scour. Wilson did pick up a land from the Thought Scour cantrip in Volcanic Island. His draw step netted him a Force of Will, and he's moving forward accordingly. pretty fluid to be able to get through his deck with these Thought Scours and Mental Notes.
Oh, there's all sorts of synergies. And we see Thought Scour, Mental Notes, these are picking up in popularity in part because Jeskai Ascendancy is becoming a deck, and you can incorporate a lot of the same synergies.
There's Punishing Fire to take care of other runes. Has to be done. We will go back Mark's way, but Bermaz is the card that's causing all the trouble here. Crocus is the draw step. Of course, that land is legendary, so that's not going to help very much right now. Mark trying to figure out if he wants to play anything pre-combat, but he'll just start by attacking here. Pretty simple. Bermaz will trigger as long as Mark does remember he'll get another cat token. It'll be an attacker for 5 points of damage.
And Jacob is now kind of hitting the spot where he needs to sort of tempo Mark out of the game. He can't answer Bermaz in any sort of permanent sense because of the Caracas on Mark's side of the table. So he's going to need to finagle it to some extent. He's going to need to lock up Mark's mana, trying to recast and redeploy and protect this Bermaz.
3 mana here. Perhaps it's time for a Flicker Wisp, and it is. We'll see if this does resolve. Wilson looking at a copy of Force of Will. Of course, Wilson does have an answer to the card in his graveyard. He's got a Punishing Fire, but mana is an issue.
Well, I think that Mark's plan here is probably to Flicker Whips his Caracas to get an opportunity to still protect the Bermaz. But if Jacob goes ahead and counters this, then perhaps if he can find 1 more mana, he can take care of the Bermaz and flip the game around.
Oh, Wilson giving it a thought. Looks like he's certainly thinking about Force of Will. It's at the front of his hand. You can see it's a tough decision here. And he will take the opportunity to Force of Will this, removing Snapcaster Mage for the alternate casting cost. Wilson, of course, will take a point of damage to do that. He's down to 10. There's Caracas as the land drop for the turn. That'll take care of the other Caracas, so Caracas still available here for Sipics.
Yeah, I like that play a lot from Sipics there. If the Flicker Whips resolves, great. You know, he gets another threat in play, and Jacob's mana is really tied up trying to contain the board. And in the event that, you know, it doesn't resolve, he has a backup Caracas to still protect Bermaz.
Looks like someone's going to go delving here in just a moment. Jacob removing some cards from his graveyard, perhaps for a Treasure Cruise, maybe even a Dig Through Time. Getting an idea of what's down there. Again, you do see the 2 copies of Punishing Fire. He needs to get those back, but here is a Cruise. So he will delve 7, pay the 1 blue mana, and it's time for Wilson to draw 3 cards.
Yeah, Jacob does not want to delve away his Punishing Fires, and past that, he wants to keep his most efficient cards in the graveyard for his 4 copies of Snapcaster Mage.
Those 4 Snapcaster Mages are the only creatures in his deck. Wilson will pass the turn back over to Sipics. Sipics going to draw. A white card is what he picked up, but I'm not entirely sure that matters at this point. What he's got on the table right now is pretty good. Though Thalia was the draw step, and that one's pretty good too.
Yeah, all these cards are problematic for Jacob. Now, the small creatures kind of just get gunned down by the Punishing Fire, but Jacob is running out of time and out of mana. So even though a lot of Mark's hand is locked out, he still may be able to squeeze across the last points of damage before Jacob locks him out.
Snapcaster Mage will be cast here before blocks. Sipics considering a response. He says that's fine. Wilson going to target his Brainstorm with the Snapcaster Mage. Doesn't mean he has to cast it, but it does have flashback at this point. And we'll see if there will be any blockers here. Mark likely has the Swords of Plowshares in his hand, hasn't cast one all game, hasn't had a reason to. And this deck does play 4 copies of that card.
It's still complicated here from Mark's side because, you know, you don't want to put your shields down here if you can avoid it. Mark probably has the sense that if something bad happens to Bermaz here, the rest of the tools in his hand are probably not good enough to win the game.
As the most important card for him this particular game might be the most important card for him in the matchup. Swords of Plowshares will occur before blockers take place, so there will be no chump blocking at this point, it seems. Now damage will come across. Bermaz should bring a cat token along with it as long as Sipics did remember, but it looks like he forgot the trigger. Here is Thalia post combat. Wilson will respond by casting the Brainstorm that does have flashback thanks to the Snapcaster Mage. So 3 cards coming here for Jacob, and we know that 2 cards will be going back in just a moment. Lightning Bolts in his hand among the options to put back.
There's a slight risk here with this play from Mark that if Jacob is able to counter the Thalia, then Grove of the Burn Willows plus Punishing Fire takes care of Bermaz, and then it's going to be tough for Mark to win the rest of the game, but is asking a lot out of Jacob right here to have Force of Will plus another blue card. But this is the Death and Taxes game plan. You know, a lot of Mark's hand is locked out, a lot of his draws are bad, but he's been just disruptive enough and has had the right mixture of weird, hard to answer threats that Jacob may just barely die before stabilizing the game.
Yeah, this is what this deck does.
Yep.
Just kind of keep you off balance, try to kill you in the meantime. It definitely has some lockout potential with Rashad and Port and Wasteland. We have seen that before. Value-making spells cost more, which at this stage of the game actually does matter quite a bit. Punishing Fire will cost 3 mana, perhaps 4 if you tack on the fact that you have to pay 1 to return it from the graveyard. Wilson going to play a land there, so he has 5 mana in play. 2 going to be tapped right now, perhaps for a Lightning Bolt, and it will be, so he's going to go after Bermaz. He'll follow up with another Lightning Bolt targeting Bermaz. So the 3/4 is finally off the table, but there are still problems on the table.
For sure, and Jacob's life total is getting pretty low.
Aether Vial was the draw there for Mark. That one doesn't matter too much at this stage in the game. Though that backup copy of Bermaz does matter. Wilson able to take care of the problem the first time. Here's an attack there from Sipics. Wilson's going to go down to 3. And we'll see if he does cast a second copy of Bermaz at this stage of the game. He's tapping 3 mana, so it looks like he's going to, and he will.
Yeah, just got to get that into play.
Wilson's going to pick up his copy of Punishing Fire off of the Grove of the Burn Willows activation. Sipics will gain a little bit of life, go up to 22. But Jacob is really being contorted here. And again, this is all what Death and Taxes does.
Yeah, it's not an overpowering strategy, but it does do enough disruptive stuff and have just enough pressure.
Wilson going to tap 3 mana here. We'll cast a Punishing Fire on Thalia. Get that off of the table. The big question is, can you get the 3/4 off the table? Here's a Thought Scour. This is all in the upkeep too, because he knows what's on top of his deck from the Brainstorm, and he's just going to concede the game. So Mark Sipics is going to win game number 1 here over Jacob Wilson. Death and Taxes up a game here over Punishing Teamer. Both players going to head over to the sideboards. I think we'll do the same.
Yeah, although I just want to clarify for the viewers at home, if you are wondering, was Jacob's last draw step there Hadestu's second right, and did he reveal Tibalt the Blood Fiend to his Thought Scour there? The answer is yes and yes. There's 1 copy of each of them in the deck.
Well, I don't know why that comes as much of a surprise.
Just clarifying. Don't see it very often.
Okay. Those are both 1-ofs in his deck on this particular weekend, something that he has done in his filming of videos for Channel Fireball. So if you have watched that series, I believe Alexander Hayne joins him on occasion as well. 2 cards that both of those gentlemen do like as singletons in this type of strategy.
Well, the biggest thing they have going for them is that they're hilarious.
Yes.
Once you get past, I think 1 Hadestu second right is actually justifiable, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
We'll take a look at Wilson's sideboard to start.
3 copies of Sensei's Divine Top, 3 Counterbalance, 4 Tarmogoyf, a Pyroclasm, an Ancient Grudge, a Counterspell, and 2 copies of Blue Elemental Blast. So the cards that really stand out to me here are the copy of Pyroclasm. Of course, Mark's deck full of small creatures. 4 copies of Tarmogoyf. If Mark removes a lot of his creature removal, which stands to reason here, Tarmogoyf's going to be pretty tough for him to get through. I think because of Aether Vial, I'm not a huge fan of Sensei's Divine Top Counterbalance, but Mark's deck is susceptible to getting locked out if he doesn't have Vial, so maybe Jacob brings that in as well.
Other side of things here for Sipics, he does have 2 copies of Cataclysm, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Ethersworn Canons, 2 Core Firewalker, 2 Council's Judgment, a Phyrexian Revoker, a Mangara of Corndor, a Relic of Progenitist, a Containment Priest, and a copy of Sunlance. A lot of nice options here, actually. Really has the ability to go after the graveyard, which is really good against Wilson's deck.
It stands out to me, even if you don't know exactly what what Jacob's up to, you can imagine that it relies pretty heavily on the graveyard, so I think it's pretty easy to bring in the copy of Relic of Progenitist and the 2 copies of Rest in Peace. Given that Jacob's a slow, kind of cumbersome control deck, and you can imagine he has access to Planeswalkers as well, I think bringing in the copies of Cataclysm are reasonable here too.
I also like the copies of Core Firewalker. We saw how difficult it was for Jacob to get some creatures off of the board, and his removal is red-based. Now, Firewalker does trade with Snapcaster Mage, unfortunately, but besides that, it's basically an unkillable creature.
Yeah, it's one of those, high upside, low downside type of threats. Maybe Jacob's removal is all red and Firewalker is a disaster for him. Maybe he has blockers or engineered explosive type effects, and then Core Firewalker is a lot less efficient than other things you can have in that slot. We'll see. I could see him bringing it in or not touching it.
The big trick is do not board in that Sunlance, because Wilson is not a Teamer Delver deck. Even though he's known for playing that strategy, he's a different deck. And we saw a pretty long game there, so we'll see if Mark did pick up on that.
Yeah, and we'll see if he noticed or made some sort of comment on the Tibalt the Blood Fiend that got revealed.
I truly do hope that he does. As these players just about ready for game number 2, we will take a look very quickly at the 2015 Open Series schedule. Season 1 here. Well, we already made it through Columbus. We're here in Philadelphia. Hey, we're heading to DC soon.
Yep, next weekend or 2 weekends from now is DC. We'll have the pre-release weekend, of course, next weekend. Indianapolis will be Legacy to close out January. Then there is a week off for our regionals. Make sure to go to StarCityGames.com/regionals for more information there. Houston, Los Angeles, Baltimore for our first ever Modern Open Series. Then Grand Prix Miami, which will be standard March 6th through 8th. Make sure to stay tuned to MagicGP.com for more information as we get a little bit closer to the event. Following weekend will be in Dallas, and then 2 weekends from them, the Season 1 Invitational in Richmond, Virginia, Standard Open Series, and a Standard and Legacy Invitational.
Going to be a lot of fun as we make our way through Season 1. We'll be qualifying 2 players for the Players' Championship throughout that season. As we do see game number 2 here, a Mother of Runes to start. Wilson will sacrifice a polluted Delta, get himself a volcanic island, and we'll see if he has a lightning bolt right away to get this off the table. Pretty important that he does.
Oh, absolutely. I think that if he's cracking here on turn 1, I imagine that's the case, but we shall see.
A lot of blue cards in hand over there. Not much of a surprise. It's just going to be a main phase brainstorm. So 3 cards coming here for Jacob. Might be looking for a Force of Will, too.
Well, I assume this is actually occurring at the end of Mark's turn.
I mean, this could certainly be on the stack. Wilson's on the play.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Looks like Wilson's finding 2 cards that he's happy to put back. Got to give it a lot of thought. Brainstorm, a very difficult card. But what's even more difficult is Mother of Runes in play against his deck. And that will resolve. So the Brainstorm was in response to Mother of Runes. It's in. Punishing Fire, Lightning Bolt, some sort of way to get off the table. That'll work. It is a Lightning Bolt to get that off the table, so he has passed that test. Here is a Plains. We'll see what Sipics wants to put together in the second turn of the game. You see he does have a copy of Stoneforge Mystic in hand. Also has a Rashad in port, but opted to go with the Plains as his land drop.
I think he also has a Firewalker in hand.
That would be the big one. If he can slide that in, and he's going to go for it. It will be a copy of Core Firewalker. And it looks like that'll be taken care of via Spell Snare. So we will go back. Wilson will draw. There's a Misty Rainforest and a passing of the turn. Sipics will draw a copy of Aether Vial. A little late to the party, but better late than never.
Maybe not. I mean, it does pair kind of nicely with the Rashad in port in hand. That could easily be his third turn here.
There's the Vial. See if this does resolve. Wilson going to sacrifice Misty Rainforest. Looks like in response to the Vial. He'll dig out a Volcanic Island. His deck, even though it is a blue-based kind of mid-range control deck, red mana is at a premium for him, given Punishing Fire.
Yeah, you're trying to set up as many red spells in the same turn as possible.
Mental Note will be cast. The old Thought Scour. The difference between Mental Note and Thought Scour is that put the top 2 cards of your library, Thought Scour can target, as an actual counterspell will take care of Vial. So Wilson did care about that, but now he doesn't have an answer to Stoneforge Mystic on the surface as far as the counterspell is concerned.
I was wondering if he was going to bring in the counterspell here just because Death and Taxes, it has a lot of mana disruption, and there isn't really one individual card you're trying to lock out of this deck. That said, this was a good spot here, as Aether Vial is a bit problematic for Jacob right now.
Batterskull will be searched up here from Sipics. Again, the options for him, Umezawa's Chite, Batterskull, and Sword of Fire and Ice, at least in the first game. We are in the second game, so perhaps he sideboarded an equipment out. We do know he has an Umezawa's Chite in his hand. We'll see, but he does opt for Batterskull yet again. Gonna go back Wilson's way. Brainstorm looked to be the draw step for the turn. Does have Punishing Fire. Looks like he has a copy of Pyroclasm in hand as well, so he is pretty good against small creature decks. You can tell his deck is definitely built with Young Pyromancer in mind to try to beat that card.
Of course, and that card's all over the place right now, so makes a lot of sense to attack that card specifically.
Brainstorm, 3 cards coming in for Wilson. Of course, 2 will go back shortly. Among those cards, a copy of Scalding Tarn. See if he wants to take it with him or not.
It looks like Jacob has boarded in the Tarmogoyfs, which I like a lot in this matchup.
As do I. Let him convert into more of a Teamer Delver strategy, something he is very comfortable playing.
Though the flip side of that is he is now very susceptible to Rest in Peace and Relic of Progenitus. His deck is all in on the graveyard.
Tarn does come into play. Punishing Fire will take care of Stoneforge Mystic. We'll head back Sipics' way. Wasteland the draw. Mark, I feel this game is getting away from him a little bit here. Jacob's just been very efficient on every turn.
Yeah, there's still no pressure in play on Jacob's side of the table, but, you know, as you mentioned, there's nothing going on Mark's side, and you can't feel too comfortable with the way this game is shaping up. Mark is also dealing with a lot of uncertainty. That's another factor here, is you kind of have an idea what Chick is up to, but not exactly.
Well, there's GT. Now here's a copy of Phyrexian Revoker. And we will see if the Revoker will resolve, and if it does, what it's going to name. Not a lot of great targets in Wilson's deck, it seems.
Yeah, I think the only thing that he can name is Tybalt the Blood Fiend, which I guess is awesome if that happens, but...
I suppose that would be an open series first, as Wilson will sacrifice his Scalding Tarn on upkeep.
Oh yeah, there's no way that's happened twice.
And interesting.
Wow. Okay.
Phyrexian Revoker is going to name Fate Stitcher. So you can tell that Mark is a little off balance here. Not entirely sure what Wilson is up to. There's Pyroclasm to get that off the table. Tarmogoyf will come down as a 5/6, and we're heading back Sipics' way.
Well, I don't really begrudge Mark naming something like that. You know, maybe Jacob's got some weird Ascendancy build. Because what else are you going to name? The only thing you've seen so far is Tybalt. That's the only thing you can name.
Too proud to name that, really.
Yeah.
Source of Plowshare is going to go after Tarmogoyf. Batterskull in Sipics' hand right now. Does he have a creature to play? Looks like he's setting up for Rashad and port activation. No? Perhaps a Thalia in hand? We'll see. He's tapping mana here. Ah, it's the Revoker test again. Let's see what he's going to go with this time. Still very unsure, as you can see.
I mean, Mark's just happy to have any creature at this point.
Well,
so.
sure. I mean, all he wants to do is connect with the GT once.
Yep.
This time he has switched it up to something a little more feng shui, I suppose. Grim Lavamancer is what he's chosen.
That's fine too.
A Thought Scour. Turn over a couple of cards there in Wilson's graveyard before passing the turn back. Sipics will draw a card. Looks like it was a copy of a Plains. That's land number 5 for Batterskull if he wants to go that route. Now the decision is, do I attack? Do I equip? How do I want to go? Looks like he's just going to attack. No equip. There's land 5. So he's going to go down the Batterskull road. Will it resolve is the question. You can see Wilson's hand. There's a lightning bolt there. And perhaps a Forcible. But Batterskull is in. And now, if I'm watching him, I'm probably wondering, how many Ancient Grudges does Jacob have?
He has 1 copy.
Okay. Again, another card that's not terribly difficult for him to find, given the Brainstorm, Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, Mental Note, Thought Scour.
He's got a lot of looks at it. And if he can find it fast enough, it's possible Tarmogoyf may be an effective blocker here as well. But again, he does not have that much time to find this stuff.
Sipics going reaching. Looks like he's going equipping. Going to diversify his bonds here a little bit, putting the GT onto the Revoker and getting into the red zone with both creatures. There are some things that can go right and wrong with how you equip there.
Yeah, you're kind of just guessing. I think Batterskull is generally safer because you've just seen so many bolts and punishing fires.
So Bolt does take care of the Revoker. No charge counters on the GT just yet. But Batterskull did come across. It's 24-16. And now 3 mana will be tapped. Let's see what this play is going to be. For Maz would be a doozy right now. It'll be a copy of Flicker Wisp. And that'll target Wasteland. Wasteland will go away for the moment. Flicker Wisp trigger will resolve. Wasteland is back, and we're going to head back Wilson's way. Wilson with Force of Will in hand, and I believe Ancient Grudge was the draw. Timely, timely, timely stuff.
Yep, that's a huge one.
Bye-bye Batterskull.
To say the very least, that was a big draw.
We're going to head back to Sipics now. Huge draw there for Wilson.
I mean, not quite out of the woods yet, but he's got a lot of answers to a 3/1 flyer.
Yeah, that's not tough for his deck to beat at all, it seems.
And as you mentioned before, he's got so many looks at it. That can look like a lucky top deck, and it was fortunate that was the timing of it, but he gets a lot of looks at Ancient Grudge over the course of the game.
Yeah, the ability for him to get through his deck is so simple.
Yeah.
His deck is so fluid. You saw the equip of the GTA. Of course, Ancient Grudge will get flashback to take care of that. Flick Whistle will come across. Wilson's down to 13. You see the life totals, 24 to 13. Wasteland will take care of Tropical Island. And we're going to go back Wilson's way. He will play a Treasure Cruise off the top of his deck.
I'm surprised that Mark is not tapping his mana in such a way to allow him to Rashad and Port, Jacob.
I'm a little surprised by that as well. At this point, because Mark has no cards in his hand, it's basically a freebie.
Yep, and there's obviously a lot of uncertainty about what Jacob is bringing to the table exactly, so I'd be looking to pin him off of mana as much as possible. I'd at least just tap the Delta and see if you can get some sort of response out of Jacob.
Yeah. Grove of the Burn Willows is the land that's played. I believe Wilson does have a copy of Punishing Fire in his graveyard. Saw that much earlier in the game. Wilson will sacrifice his Delta, go get a Tropical Island. So plenty of green mana now. Now there is Tarmogoyf, and it's a big one. A 5/6 and a passing of the turn back to Sipics, who looked ahead in this game 2 turns ago.
Comfortably ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, Battered Skull plus Jite. Some mana denial elements. Jacob with nothing going on, but an Ancient Grudge, and then a Treasure Cruise, and the whole thing's flipped around.
Lightning Bolt takes care of the Flicker Wisp. Council's Judgment will take care of the Tarmogoyf. And Wilson will pick up his copy of Grove of the Burn Willows. Sipics will get a life, of course. But he's out of cards now, and he's in a world of trouble.
Yep. Not only is he out of cards, but he is running out of draw steps that matter.
Yep.
A lot of his creatures now just get mowed down by the Punishing Fire, so...
And a top deck Tarmogoyf will allow Wilson to really take control of this game. It's on Sipics now to draw a card like Council's Judgment, like Rest in Peace, like Swords of Plowshares to slow that thing down.
Yeah, Sipics has gone through a lot of cards here without finding an anti-graveyard card. Possible he didn't bring them in, but if he didn't for game 2, they're definitely coming in for game 3.
Yeah, you can believe that. Sipics will draw his card for the turn. Just has to pass the turn back. Punishing Fire is going to go upstairs here. It'll start chipping away a little bit. Wilson will deal 2, and then he'll give Mark a life to have Punishing Fire back in his hand. He still has that Force of Will over there. We'll draw a card and attack here for 5.
And that's, part of the reason, even though I'm sure it's half a joke that you can see Hidetsu's second right in this deck, is with Grove of the Burn Willows and Punishing Fire, you have a lot of precise control over your opponent's life total.
Yep. Tending them is not even close out of the question. It's not very hard to do. Scholar and Turn going to come down. Tarmogoyf going to keep beating in. Sipics is at 8 right now. Yeah, and that is going to do it for this particular game. Jacob Wilson's going to win game number 2 here over Mark Sipics. Teamer Delver, Death and Taxes tied up as they get ready for game number 3.
Also,
some timely top decks there for Wilson.
Absolutely. Also, interestingly enough, I just assumed that Jacob was on a Wasteland plan here. He's not. It's incidental. There's one Loam, which, he can flip over and some games he's going to run away with, but no copies of Wasteland in the list.
Interesting.
Well, this deck's pretty colored mana sensitive.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. A lot of stuff to do with blue mana. He's not really on that kind of Wasteland you out plan either.
I also feel like once Treasure Cruise is in your deck, your lands are just more valuable than your opponent's lands because you want to be Treasure Cruising and then casting everything in the same turn. You also want the game to go on longer, and Wasteland promotes shutting your opponent out before the game even starts. So Treasure Cruise and Wasteland, you don't see very often paired in the same deck.
Well, players will shuffle up here for game number 3. Not a lot of changes there from Sipics' side, so you have to imagine the Graveyard Hate was in his deck. Just didn't draw any. He doesn't get through his deck as quickly as Wilson does, but we'll see if he's able to draw any of that Graveyard Hate in game number 3. However, we will discuss Season 2 of the Open Series here for 2015. Going to kick it off not too far from here in Syracuse.
Yeah, this is a short season too. So Syracuse, Providence, Cleveland, your hometown, and then Seattle, where you currently reside, for the beginning of May. And then a few weeks after that, we'll be in Dallas, Worcester, which will be the one Legacy Open of Season 2, and then the Season 2 Invitational in Columbus, which will be attached to the Origins Game Fair, June 5th, 6th, and 7th, with a Modern Standard Invitational and Modern as the Open Series format.
You mentioned Seattle is my current town that I do reside in, and that is accurate. And while I do love Seattle where I live, I'm a Carolina Panthers fan today.
Okay.
Go get him, Cam. Just go get him.
Just a hater.
It's nothing personal.
Sure.
Just the Seahawks fans are intolerable, so I have to root for them. Also, good friend and former director Jonathan Choi.
Yep.
He's a big Carolina Panthers fan, and it's his birthday today.
Okay.
So come on, What are we really doing here?
One time for Choi.
Absolutely. Let's get the job done, Cam Newton. The Seahawks are going to win by probably 25 points.
25 is a lot.
That is a lot. That is
a lot to win by.
I think that's how much they're going to win by. We'll start off with a port and a vial, and we'll see if it does resolve here. And it will very quickly there for Mark. A Pluto Delta there for Wilson, and just a passing of the turn. Vial's going to take on up to 1. Sipics will draw. It's a copy of Caracas.
Not the opening you want to see on Jacob's side of the table.
No.
Aether Vial makes it a little tricky for Jacob to time his tricks, and Rashad and Port and Mana Denial in general stuff on him as well.
The planes here for Mark. Mark will just pass the turn with Port activations at the ready. Waiting patiently as Wilson plays another Delta. Vial's going to tick up to 2. Sipics will draw. Looks like a copy of Thalia for the turn.
Curious here about Mark's decision not to use Rashad and Port at all against these fetch lands. You know, even if Jacob sacks and responds, then Jacob is risking Wasteland, and Jacob just might allow you to tap it, which again allows Wasteland to be a live draw.
And if you can't get a Delta off of the table, or both Deltas, if something like that would happen, and that makes Brainstorm a little bit worse.
Exactly. There's really no reason not to, and you may get some small movement out of Jacob here if you use the Rashad and Port.
Oh, Mark did play his 3rd land in Caracas. Now he's going to Vial, and he'll put Thalia into play. This looks like it may be on the main phase, which is a little bit interesting. And it is, so we're going to head back Wilson's way. There are ups and downs to activating Vial on his own main phase there to put Thalia in. Does look a little strange, but he wants to be able to contort the mana, I guess, right away as opposed to waiting. There's a Grove. Pass the turn back.
Yeah, I think you can at least wait until Jacob makes a move with one of his fetch lands before vialing in, but I don't think it's a huge difference either way.
Sipic's going to draw a card. And he'll get in here for 2 points of damage. Wilson's going to go down to 18. Does need to be a little bit more proactive with those port activations, so I agree with you.
Yeah, there's very little reason not to.
Wilson going to sacrifice Pluto Delta. Go down to 17. There's Volcanic Island. Let's make it 16.
Unless there's some really strange trick he's holding up or something, which I just don't think is the case.
Yeah, I don't think so either, given that we do have his deck list available. I mean, he could be trying to bluff something, but again, the ability just to activate Rashad and Port and contort Wilson's mana is so important, because there is Punishing Fire. And it will be a Caracas picking up that Thalia. We're going to head back Wilson's way here. Now there is a port activation. You only have to Grove here, I imagine. I suppose it could be a Volcanic Island that he does target. And he will go after the Volcanic Island, so cut off the blue mana a little bit.
Also, Jacob can do something productive with the Grove in response to the port,
Sure.
which is getting back the Punishing Fire. The Volcanic Island is a little bit more awkward for him to do something with in response. So I actually like going after the Volcanic, assuming he's not that worried about Tarmogoyf, which it appears he is not.
Here's the hand for Gataxian Probe. Thalia you already know about, Relic of Progenitus, Burmaz, King of Oresco, Swords, Plowshares, Flicker Wisp, and a copy of Council's Judgment. So a pretty expensive hand here. Thankfully for Mark, he does have that Vial on 3.
Yeah, this is a really good Aether Vial hand, that's for sure.
We saw just how powerful Burmaz was in the first game. Could cause some problems here for Wilson in the second.
Though I believe Jacob has picked up his one Hidetsu's second right.
He does have Hidetsu's second right in hand. You are correct.
Which is a path for a pretty fast kill.
He's going to have to find a way to set it up.
As someone who has Hidetsu's second righted numerous people out of matches, I can tell you, it is really fun having that card in your hand.
Yeah, that one's right in your range.
Oh,
it really is.
Oh yeah.
During your Kamigawa days.
Oh yeah.
Target player has exactly 10 life. Hidetsu's second right deals 10 damage to that player. It is fun and friendly. As here, Snapcaster Mage yet again, going to flashback attacks and probe. See the same 6 cards. There's a draw. Sipics will activate his Vial. And there is Burmaz. Smart going to untap 3 lands, Vial on 3. Stoneforge missing the draw step.
Now I'm really interested to see, does Mark feel like he's got enough action to win just with the Vial set on 3, Flicker Wisp and Ramaz, and wants to just say, port Jacob and leave the Caracas up, or does he continue to develop his board?
I would have personally some interest in continuing to develop. We'll see how Mark does want to play it.
Because it's been trivial so far for Jacob to fend off everything that's been tiny. So there is, you know, based on what you've seen so far, an argument for saying, all right, I'm just going to pin down his mana and file in a Flicker Wisp, keep Caracas up, and not worry about the other stuff in my hands.
Snapcaster Mage looks like it's going to do some blocking. Going to jump in front of that cat token. They will trade. 3 damage will come across. Looks like Wilson's going down to 9. Perhaps it's time for a relic. And it is. Mark going to pop that. He'll get to draw a card. Now, the big question is, how necessary is the pop there? There's a lot of different things he can do that turn, of course. You know, one is just play Relic, play Thalia, and then leave the Vial on 3 open, which I think is the line I would have taken there. It gives you some nice options. It also leaves you a Flicker Wisp over the entire time. Yeah,
I think that I would have preferred for Thalia to resolve that turn, because it's hard to imagine Jacob doing too much with his graveyard that you're that concerned about with the Thalia in play. But I can also respect, you know, I just don't exactly know what's going on in my opponent's graveyard in this matchup, and this seems like a reasonable window. There's a Punishing Fire in there. Let me just get this off the table.
Now, you're not playing against a stock deck, that's for sure.
And once you play Thalia, it probably means your Relic is shut off for the rest of the game, because it's your whole turn to play and activate. So I think that I agree that I would have played Thalia in my own seat, but I think the play is close. I don't think it's obvious.
Volcanic at number 4, searched up via Delta. Wilson tapping some mana. This is a Punishing Fire. That's going to resolve. Wilson will pick it up, and he will cast it again. See if Sipics wants to go the Caracas route or the Flicker Wisp. Probably looks like he's going to go the Caracas route. So Ramaz back in hand. They'll put Ramaz back into play via Vial. Here is Thalia. Caracas going to come down. And that's a turn I kind of like.
I do too. It was Jacob's whole turn, and Mark was able to keep his Ramaz alive, redeploy, still relieve protection up, and put a troublesome Thalia into play.
Continuing to contort Wilson's plays, which is what this deck does best.
And Jacob can't resolve one of his creatures right now because he knows he's playing against Council's Judgment and Swords of Plowshares in Mark's hand.
Tarmogoyf's plan is right out the window.
Exactly.
Looks like Wilson will be passing the turn back in just a moment, and he will. So Sipics will draw. And on the upkeep, it looks like Wilson's going to return Punishing Fire, and have to pay 3 mana for this one to go after Thalia. The big question here is, does this resolve? And it looks like the answer is yes, it will. So Sipics will draw a card for his turn. As that all took place on the upkeep, it's a Plains. Land not bad in this situation. Also, Mark does have a backup copy of Thalia, so it makes sense that he would let that Punishing Fire resolve.
Exactly. It's no reason to get into a big fight about this when the real prize is Ramaz. He wants to keep that alive at all costs.
Spellsner will take care of Thalia. Ramaz is going to come in along with its cat token. 4 damage is going to come across. Wilson going to go down to 4. And will he go the Stoneforge Mystic route? Or does he want to leave mana available to use Caracas? And he looks like he wants to leave the mana available. A lot of options here for Sipics. He will go with Stoneforge.
I think Flicker Wisp is enough of an insurance policy here that it's worth getting the Stoneforge into play.
Stoneforge will go searching. We'll see what equipment he wants. He's found Batterskull the other 2 times he's cast it. Looks like he's going for Batterskull again. So this is a situation, if I'm Mark, I think I want a little bit cheaper equipment.
Yeah, because, you know, you don't want to try to get this thing into play. It's very expensive and it's slow. I would rather have something in case things went really wrong, which to me is like a sword. It turns any one of your random threats into lethal, and if you can get it on something, shuts off red removal.
However, Batterskull is the weapon of choice for Mark, and he will pass the turn back pretty comfortably. Wilson will play a copy of Mental Note. 2 cards will be turned over. Thought Scour and Force of Will, cantrip. Tropical Island in the draw. Can the Platinum level pro work his way out of this situation? Perhaps it's time to cantrip again. It is. Thought Scour.
Not a good sign if he's doing this.
So Lightning Bolt, Snapcaster Mage to go away. Lightning Bolt comes to hand. Tropical Island's a land for the turn. I'm just going to pass the turn back. Now the question here is, do you Violent Flicker Wisp? Just to get another creature on the table.
That seems like a huge risk here.
And you can see that's what Mark's thinking, and perhaps Jacob's trying to bait him into doing that. I'm with you, it does seem risky.
Assuming that he can't kill your Burmaz, you have a lot of damage coming across the table next turn. He's going to have to either kill Burmaz or put together 3 removal spells to even continue playing. So I would not want to risk it. Against 4 mana, I think you're pretty safe just moving into combat.
Yeah, he refused to risk it. Here's Snapcaster Mage. Looks like this is all before combat. Wilson with Lightning Bolt over there in the graveyard. He's going to use that, looks like. At least that's what he will be targeting with the Snapcaster Mage. So that'll have flashback. But I must say, I do not approve of these white border Lightning Bolts that Jacob is playing.
Neither do I.
No.
I think right now Jacob is probably in the I need Mark to make a mistake stage of the game.
He's certainly in that camp, yeah. And that's why you see Mark kind of treading lightly here, because I think he's realized that. He just wants to make sure he doesn't make a mistake. Now here is Flicker Wisp, and that can get that out of the way. So is this the best use of Flicker Wisp? We're going to find out.
I think Mark's position here is Jacob needs to cast 2 bolts this turn anyway to survive. So I don't really care about Flicker Wisping the Snapcaster Mage insofar as it coming back and triggering again, because Jacob's mana is going to be tied up completely just killing Burmaz. And he may need Snapcaster Mage to block to make all of his lines of play work anyway.
And if the turn is bolt plus bolt, you know, where are these 2 bolts going?
Right.
If they're both going to Burmaz, well, I have Caracas. I can just pick it up and then replay it.
Exactly.
I don't get to attack with it, which kind of stinks, but that's okay. It looks like it will be Bolt going after Burmaz, step 1.
And I think Jacob needs to do all this pre-combat so the Burmaz doesn't trigger.
Yeah. And now here's the second Lightning Bolt going after Burmaz. And now we'll see if Sipics does have a response. Again, he does have Caracas out there, but he's also got a few cards in his hand as well, so he's got some options here. You see him reaching for Caracas to pick up his legendary creature. So those 2 Lightning Bolts, effectively useless. And again, this is just Death and Taxes doing what it does, which is contorting the opponent's place as much as possible. Now it's a useless turn for Wilson.
Now I'm curious to see whether or not Mark goes cast Burmaz or activate Stoneforge Mystic.
I would want to be attacking with Stoneforge Mystic.
I think so too.
I just want to keep chipping away and get this game over with. I don't need a Batter Skull to win. I've got 4 creatures on the table. Yeah, now there's Burmaz. Now for Wilson, Snapcaster Mage will come back, but as you mentioned, the mana's all tapped, so that doesn't matter. There's no flashback of anything, and now we go back Jacob's way for his turn. He's got 3 cards. He'll draw a 4th. Pyroclasm would be helpful in this situation if he were to draw it.
He would still need to pair it with something else to handle Burmaz.
Here's a Treasure Cruise. You have to feel that that's the card he's looking for right now. Because if he's able to draw a Pyroclasm here, he can Pyroclasm, kill a bunch of stuff. He'll kill the Stoneforge, mixing the token and the Flicker Wisp, and he's got Punishing Fire plus Grove in play. So he's got the necessary mana to make that all come together. As you see, there's 5 mana in play, but he's got to find that Pyroclasm.
Very impressive here. I mean, Jacob has looked dead to rights for 3 or 4 turns, and he's not out of this just yet.
Jacob going to pick up Punishing Fire, kill Flicker Wisp. 2 mana left over. There's a land for the turn. Pass the turn back. Sipics will draw. Looks like a copy of Umezawa's Jite. Swords of Plowshares looks attractive here. Council's Judgment made 2. Swords of Plowshares, though, does let the opponent gain life, so maybe going this route is better, and that is going to get the job done. Mark Sipics will win this match here over Jacob Wilson, 2-1. Death and Taxes will take care of Punishing Teamer. At the top of the show, we talked about which route is the best way to go. Is it Treasure Cruise? Is it try to play something without Treasure Cruise that's a little more fair, like Death and Taxes, perhaps combo? Well, Death and Taxes wins round number 1 here over a great player in Jacob Wilson.
And that was a great demonstration of what we're talking about, of can you find threat cards that overpower someone who's regularly drawing extra cards.